The alien warrior feared every soldier until a human medic saved her life. There is a very specific document floating around in classified galactic military archives titled Species Threat Assessment, Comparative Analysis. It ranks every known sentient species by combat capability, technological sophistication, and general terrifyingness. The Kraveks sit near the top, obviously, all muscle and menace and a fondness for eating enemy battle flags. The Threxian Dominion sits comfortably in the upper tier 2, disciplined, ruthless, allergic to mercy. And then there's humanity, sitting at the very top of the fear index despite ranking somewhere in the middle for actual physical capability, which, if you think about it for more than 5 seconds, makes absolutely no sense. Nobody could explain it properly. There were theories. Committees. At least one very expensive, very inconclusive research grant. The consensus, eventually, boiled down to something no analyst wanted to write in an official report. Humans were terrifying because they refused to be scared of anything, up to and including their own deaths, and they had an infuriating habit of laughing about it the entire time. Which is exactly the kind of thing that made Commander Draza Kel's left eye twitch. Draza Kel was, by any reasonable measure, the most feared officer in the Threxian Dominion's frontier fleet. She had survived the Karn Valley massacre, the only officer of her unit to walk out alive, because everyone else had trusted the wrong allies and paid for it in blood. She had learned, the hard way, that trust was a luxury soldiers who wanted to keep breathing couldn't afford. She didn't trust her own shadow most days. She certainly didn't trust humans. So when Dominion Command informed her that her unit was being assigned a human field medic for the upcoming frontier deployment, she responded the way any reasonable, battle-hardened commander would. Absolutely not. It's not a request, Commander, said the liaison officer over the comm, sounding deeply unbothered by her tone, which, honestly, should have been a warning sign in itself. I have led 17 successful campaigns without human assistance. And you'll lead an 18th with it. Corporal Ashford reports to your unit at 0600. Draza ended the call with slightly more force than necessary. Somewhere in the galaxy, she was certain, someone was laughing at her. That someone turned out to be Corporal Bo Ashford, who arrived at exactly 0601, 1 minute late, wearing a grin that suggested he found the entire concept of punctuality personally offensive. You're late, Draza said, not looking up from her tactical display. By 1 minute. I like to think of it as fashionably on time. Keeps everyone on their toes. He extended a hand, which she ignored. Bo Ashford. Field medic, professional smart mouth, allergic to boring briefings. I did not ask for your personality traits, Corporal. No, but you're gonna get them anyway, that's kind of a package deal. He glanced around her command tent with open curiosity, unbothered by the 4 armed Threxian soldiers watching him like he might explode. Nice setup. Very stabby. Lot of knives for a medical support mission. This is a combat unit. Sure. Just saying, most medics I know prefer their patients arrive with fewer holes in them. Just a professional preference. Draza stared at him for a long moment, cataloging everything wrong with this situation. He was smaller than her by a full head. His posture was relaxed to the point of insolence. He had, she was fairly certain, just made a joke during a military briefing, which was either deeply unprofessional or a court-martial offense depending on which regulation you consulted. You will follow my orders without commentary, she said. Yeah, that's not really gonna happen, but I'll follow them, that's the important part. Commentary's free. Comes with the service. She decided, in that moment, that command had assigned her a liability wrapped in sarcasm, and that this deployment was going to require significantly more patience than her 17 previous campaigns combined. The first patrol together confirmed every one of her worst suspicions. Bo hummed while walking through hostile territory. Bo made jokes about the terrain, the weather, her scowl, her weapon, her general demeanor, which he affectionately began referring to as murder mode. When she barked orders, he acknowledged them with a casual salute and a comment that undercut the entire chain of command in one sentence. By the end of the first day, Draza was fairly certain she had aged several years. "Do you take anything seriously?" she finally snapped, as they made camp for the night in a rocky ravine near contested border territory. Bo considered the question with more thought than she expected. "Yeah. Keeping people alive. Everything else is negotiable." It was the first honest thing he'd said all day, and it caught her off guard enough that she didn't have a sarcastic response ready, which annoyed her more than anything else he'd done so far. The ambush came 2 days later, exactly when nobody expected it, which was, statistically, when ambushes always came. They were moving through a narrow canyon pass, standard patrol formation, when the first energy round cut through the morning silence and took down the soldier walking point. Chaos erupted immediately, weapons fire echoing off canyon walls, soldiers scrambling for cover, comm channels flooding with overlapping shouted coordinates. Draza's training took over instantly. She barked commands, directed her unit toward defensible positions, returned fire with the calm precision of someone who had survived exactly this kind of nightmare before. And then a blast caught her from the side, throwing her against a rock face hard enough to crack something, and the world tilted sideways into static and pain. She hit the ground behind a boulder, separated from the rest of her unit, blood soaking through her uniform faster than she liked to admit, weapon arm useless at her side. For the first time since Karn Valley, Commander Draza Kell felt something close to real fear. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard someone shouting her name, and then Bo Ashford was sliding into cover beside her, medical kit already open, hands moving with a speed and precision that contradicted every joke he'd made in the last 2 days. "Hey, Commander, you're bleeding on my nice clean canyon, very rude." "Ashford," she gritted out, "return to your position, that is an order." "Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and file that order under things I'm ignoring, hold still, this is gonna sting a little." He pressed a compress against her side with enough pressure to make her vision swim, all while incoming fire pinged off the rocks above them. "You know, for someone who supposedly doesn't trust humans, you sure did throw yourself directly into the one situation where you'd need one. This is not the time for commentary. It's exactly the time, keeps your brain active, keeps you talking, talking's good, talking means you're not dying on my watch, and honestly Commander, my performance reviews cannot handle another dead officer this quarter." Despite the pain, despite the chaos, despite everything, Draza found herself gritting out something that was almost a laugh, quickly swallowed and denied. "You are the strangest medic I have ever encountered." "Yeah, I get that a lot. Usually right before someone thanks me. Feel free to start whenever." She wanted to argue. She wanted to remind him that she outranked him, that this level of insubordination would be noted in her official report, that soldiers under her command did not talk to her like this while actively bleeding onto Dominion-issued equipment. Instead, she found herself watching his hands work with steady, practiced efficiency, and realized, with a kind of dazed clarity, that he wasn't panicking at all. He was completely calm. The jokes weren't recklessness. They were armor. "We need to move," Bo said, glancing over the boulder at the incoming enemy positions. "Backup still 4 minutes out, and I don't love our odds of surviving 4 more minutes sitting here looking pretty. I cannot walk." "Good thing I'm not asking you to walk." Before she could protest, he'd looped her good arm over his shoulders, hauling her up with a strength that seemed disproportionate to his size, already moving them toward better cover while returning suppressive fire with his sidearm one-handed, an objectively insane combination of actions that should not have been possible simultaneously. "This is reckless," she snarled, pain flaring with every step. "Extremely. Ask me if I care." A round sparked off the rock beside them, and he laughed, actual genuine laughter, breathless and sharp. "You know, back home, we've got a saying. Can't hit what you can't predict. Works great until it doesn't, but hey, we're not dead yet, so I'm calling it a win." She should have been furious. She should have been terrified. Instead, Dragged half-conscious through enemy fire by a human who found the entire situation hilarious, Draza Kel felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt safe. They made it to the extraction point 63 seconds before backup arrived, which Bo later insisted counted as technically on time by his own personal standards. Draza spent the next 3 days in the Dominion medbay, drifting in and out of consciousness, and when she finally woke fully, the first thing she saw was Bo Ashford sitting in a chair beside her bed, feet propped up, eating something out of a ration pack with the enthusiasm of a man who had not, in fact, nearly died 2 days prior. "Oh good, you're up. I was getting bored. Also you talk in your sleep, very concerning things about tactical formations, very passionate." Ashford. "Commander." He set the ration pack aside, and for one brief, unguarded moment, real relief flickered across his face before the grin slid back into place. "You gave me a scare out there, for the record. Wasn't loving the whole bleeding out thing you had going on. You did not seem scared." "Yeah, well, panicking doesn't stop bleeding, so I save that for later. Very efficient system, 10 out of 10, recommend it." She studied him for a long moment, taking in the exhaustion in his eyes, the dark circles, evidence that he hadn't slept much since the ambush. He'd stayed. He'd dragged her through enemy fire while laughing, kept her conscious with sarcasm and sheer stubborn refusal to let her die, and asked for nothing in return except, apparently, better hospital food. "Why do you joke?" she asked quietly, even in moments like that. Bo shrugged, the motion easy, but his answer carried real weight beneath it. "Because the alternative is freezing up, and frozen medics don't save anybody. Humor keeps my hands steady. Keeps the patient calmer too, usually. Not always. You're a tough audience, Commander, not gonna lie." She didn't have a response to that. Not immediately. But something shifted in her that day, quiet and unspoken, the beginning of trust rebuilding itself in places she'd assumed were permanently closed off since Karn Valley. Months passed. Draza and Bo became, against every prediction Dominion Command had made, an efficient and formidable team. Her fellow Threxian officers began noticing changes in her they couldn't quite explain, a dry, unexpected wit creeping into her briefings, sharp sarcasm delivered with the same deadly seriousness she'd once reserved exclusively for combat strategy. "Commander," her adjutant said carefully one afternoon, "did you just make a joke during the tactical review?" "Did I? How unfortunate. Must be a translation error." Nobody believed her, least of all Bo, who gave her a proud, knowing grin from across the room that she pointedly ignored while fighting the smallest smile of her own. The real test came during a joint diplomatic session months later, when a visiting Cravex delegate made a dismissive comment about human forces being reckless liabilities in combat scenarios, unfit for serious military engagement. Draza, who had spent 17 campaigns trusting no one and had nearly died trusting the wrong people once before, found herself responding without hesitation. "The last human I fought alongside dragged me through active enemy fire while cracking jokes about my bedside manner," she said flatly. "I am alive because of that recklessness. I would suggest revising your assessment before it costs you something considerably more valuable than pride." The Cravex delegate had no response prepared for that. Bo, watching from across the room, simply raised his cup in a small, silent toast. The galaxy still didn't fully understand why humans topped every threat assessment despite lacking the raw power of species like the Cravex or the discipline of the Threxian Dominion. But Draza Kel understood now, understood it in a way no report or committee ever could. Humans didn't survive the galaxy by being the strongest. They survived by refusing to let fear have the final word, and somewhere along the way, without ever meaning to, they taught everyone around them to do the same.